Dan, hello. How are we?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
No, pleasure. And I look forward to learning a lot about my childhood imagination and filling in some myths and better understanding things after a long and illustrious career flying planes. So I guess the golden question is, why did you decide to join the RAF?
Oh, mate, for me, it was a childhood dream. Yeah, I was very lucky. I actually grew up abroad. I grew up in Hong Kong. And for those you may or may not remember, it used to be one of the most dangerous runways to land on in the world. They used to have to come in through the buildings almost and do this turn at the last minute to land on a strip of concrete just surrounded by water. It's notoriously difficult to land on. And my school was on the corner that the aircraft used to turn over. So, yeah, I was always inspired by the noise, the smell. Yeah, my father was a pilot, and yeah, it was just kind of in the family, in the blood from an early age. And we used to come back to the UK, summer holidays type thing. It was an exciting thing to do anyway, and then go down to the air shows. And if you've been anywhere near an air show and seen tornadoes or any type of fighter aircraft fly 100, 200, 500 feet over your head doing 500-600 miles an hour, and that noise just goes through your chest, I mean, if that doesn't inspire you, then, and you don't have a love for it, then I don't know what will. But yeah, that's kind of how it grew. And I used to disappear back to Hong Kong, which clearly those airplanes weren't there, and I used to just form dreams and start that visualization process. A lot of stuff you've done, I'm sure visualization's been a massive part of that. And it started for me for about 5-6 years old, and at 18, 19, a few days after my 19th birthday, I was lucky enough to join the Air Force and be given the opportunity to go fly fighters. Was
there ever another option, or was it just...
No, I don't think so. As much as my mum tried. As much as my mum said, look, come on, try and do something else. Even, bless them, my teachers at school who were fantastic were like, hey, look, why don't you just at least apply to university? But, I'd rung the careers office in the university and they said, look, you don't need a degree. If you want to join the Air Force at 18, 19, as long as you've got, at the time it was a couple of GCSEs and 2 or 3 A levels, which I achieved, then we don't need a degree off you. Why not join? So I was like, well, why would I go to university? I look back now and think, you fucking idiot. So, why did you drive yourself into having no options? If you hadn't achieved it, if there'd been a defence review, which there have been, and they've got rid of aeroplanes and they've downsized the size of the military significantly. If you get caught up in that, what's plan B? I didn't really have given myself a plan B, and I look back now and think, my God. But at the time, there was no other option. It was going to work for me. I was going to put a lot of hard work in. I was going to make my dream happen, and I was one of the lucky ones that made it so.
It's a good thing you aren't afflicted with my peanut allergy, asthma, and poor eyesight. Otherwise, you would have hit a few brick walls.
Well, mate, do you know what? It was a couple of close calls. It's I'm quite tall. I'm 6'2", and so to actually sit on an ejection seat, you can't be too big, because if in the unlikely event you need to pull the handle and ride the rail, as it's called, if your femurs are too long, you'll clip your knees on the way out and probably take the lower half of your leg off. So you'll be probably a double amputee from the knee down the second you pull that handle. And I'm in by about 3 millimeters. So I just made it for that. And the other one was, I loved playing rugby growing up, and I took a couple of head knocks, and I was very lucky to convince my mum one day that I think it was probably more... I was just a bit unstable in my feet rather than concussion, because I think anything on that on your medical record, and you're out the game from the get-go. So
I've had 5 of those in my lifetime as well, so I'm just fucked from every angle here.
So I was just like, I obviously I wasn't committed enough on the rugby field. In fact, a couple of my mates would probably agree with that. But yeah, mate, it's a lot of luck involved, as you know, in these journeys. There's a lot of effort, there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of self-belief, but you have to acknowledge there's a lot of luck in all of this to make it happen.
And the process has changed as well in terms of fitness testing, in terms of the consultation process that the MOD have outsourced to get applicants and everything going on. How and we'll obviously come back to everything that's happened between then and now, but reflecting on the application process, the appetite, the even patriotism, I guess the pride, the way that the MOD do things then versus now. Are you glad that you existed in the RF when you did?
Yeah. I mean, the guys before me will say the same thing I'm about to say to you. It's like, I feel like I was the last wave of the old school in a weird way, and the guys ahead of me would go, mate, you don't even know you were born. You were the millennials, and then there was the Gen Zs. But, when you look at how the system has changed so much, I'm so grateful that I was in the time I was in, because I feel we were at the end. Do you know what? We were kind of the end. It sounds ridiculous in terms of I joined in 2004. There was still aircraft flying that were designed for the Cold War. So there was still that, not that mindset as such, but, we still had Tornadoes, 2 types of Tornadoes. We still had a Harrier, which is the aircraft that people might know. It's hovers. We put it on our carriers. We still had the Jaguar, which is a low attack aircraft. We had the Canberra, which is essentially a high-level spy plane initially. So all these airplanes have gone, and they all were retired from service during my service career. The Nimrod, which was, if you're from Scotland, it played a massive part in anti-submarine and surface warfare, or below surface warfare, I should say, based out of Kinloss, an Air Force base on the north coast of Scotland. All these aircraft have gone, and they all went in my time. And with that went a massive mindset as well of just how people went about doing their business. Obviously, we needed less people, so that affected the employment strategy. They had less frontline aircraft, so in terms of what the Air Force is trying to achieve changed. But don't get me wrong, it's become a more modern fighting force. The equipment in the Air Force now is insane. What those aircraft can do is amazing. So actually, you don't need as many, but it did get a lot smaller, and with that, it changed. And I'm very proud to have been a part when all those different aircraft were there, because you learned so much from what everyone else knew and what their aircraft type did, and it was what you would expect it to be. Friday nights were pretty heavy in the squadron bars, and there was a few hard knocks flying around, and it was kind of what I kind of look at some like major or professional rugby teams to be. You train hard, fight hard, socialised hard, and that has definitely changed in the last few years.
I think the fascination with getting in a plane and flying the plane is clearly what led you down this career path, and is an itch I've never scratched. There seems to be a real tradition of middle-aged white men that have sold businesses suddenly getting their pilot's license and doing things. So it's clearly, I'd like maybe to go full circle and become a child again at some point in my life, but you've done it. So there is a bit of jealousy in my question. But talk me through the process of 19 years old, joining, to getting in a plane and flying a plane that I can only imagine in the first instance scared the life out of you in a very visceral, experiential, and once in a lifetime sort of way. What is the actual process in the RAF from getting to start to in a plane?
Yeah, sure, mate. You turn up day one to officer training, which is Cranwell for the Air Force up in Lincolnshire, with your ironing board under your arm and like a bag, and that's it. And so the first few months is just basically beating the civilian out of you, breaking you down. There'll be army guys listening to here saying you don't know you were born. It's probably a bit softer in the Air Force, but that's fine. I'm cool with that. But they kind of smash the civvy out of you, as they call it, and then build you back up into a leader. So after the first 6 months, you graduate as an officer, and you're a commissioned officer into, at the time, Her Majesty's Royal Air Force, now King's. And you come out of that, and you go into professional training, but you are in a position to be able to lead the men and women that when you go off and take your frontline role, that's what you'll be expected to do. Now, for a pilot, you all go into a group. So you go and fly a small aircraft to begin with. It's only like on the weekend, just kind of the airplane you've just talked about. A small, light, single propeller airplane that you see flying around the countryside on the weekend. And now they're a little bit punchier than that, as in you can do some aerobatics in it, basic formation, getting back to the airfield if the engine fails, all the kind of basic stuff that a pilot should be able to do. But they do that over about 4 to 6 months. And from those, you're kind of graded. Now, the experience of that is I can't believe I'm here. Should I be here? So we're going to, the emotion there is, just expecting someone to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, mate, sorry, wrong course. You weren't even supposed to get through the front door. So there's that rides with you the whole time. There's a constant fear of failure because it's a competitive system. Every flight is graded. And it's graded for about 4.5 years. And we'll go into the process when you get to more advanced aircraft. But every flight is graded. So every day you go to work, they're watching you, and they're looking at clearly your leadership, your teamwork, your loyalty, your communication, all the standard attributes that they want from a pilot. But then obviously clearly they're prioritizing your skill in the air and your ability to learn. And so every pilot who joins will fly this airplane. I'm talking about the little light aircraft. And from that, you're graded over the whole Royal Air Force at that time. And the top, whatever the number might be that particular year, the top that have passed that line in the sand will go on to continue their flying training as fighter pilots. Others will go on to continue their flying training as helicopter pilots, and others will go to like transport aircraft, as you've seen, probably dropping humanitarian aid, paratroopers, and all that, and all the stuff in between. So, by the way, that's not to say it's graded that the best guys only go fighters. Some years there might not be enough slots. You know, it just how the cookie crumbles some years. But you have to be competitive and put yourself in a position to be at the top of the course, to be eligible to go on to fighter training. So I'll speak to that for the rest of this pod, if you don't mind, because I didn't fly helicopters or multi-engine, so it wouldn't be fair to me to explain that. Then it just starts getting all a bit real. You go up to another base. Once you've passed that, you start putting on like the kit that you see fighter pilots wear, the helmets, the oxygen masks, the dart visors, the G suits. You start flying on ejection seats, which is all a bit real. You know, you're taxiing out to the runway. I was 21, and you're reaching down, taking a pin out of your seat, and now you're sat on an explosive seat that you pull that handle, it's going to fire you through the roof of the airplane. You could come down in a parachute. So it's all gets a bit real, and you start thinking, holy shit, you start growing up quick. That's especially what you do, start growing up quick. But you still got that imposter syndrome, and you still got that competitive edge. Every day, just put it into perspective, after 4.5 years, you could go in, you could have a bad weekend at home. Now, this may have changed, but this was in my time, and I'm only talking, this was late 2000s. You could have a bad weekend, going on Monday, fail the trip on Monday. They give you another chance on Tuesday to fly the trip. You fail the trip on Tuesday. You don't make the standard. Wednesday, they're probably going to sit down with you, have a meeting, say, hey, look, what's up? Can we help? How about we go out this afternoon and we'll do another practice? You go practice on the Wednesday. If you go out on Thursday and you fail that trip, you're packing your bags on Friday and you're done. You ain't coming back. And you've been there 4.5 years. So it can go wrong very, very quickly for people. So, and you see that happening around you all the time. It's not quite special forces training, but it's brutal. It's high-end stuff. You're flying fighter aircraft here. It's not easy. And so that kind of develops into, evenings where you're in each other's room and, on the base going through safety checks. Like, right, you get an engine failure. How are you going to deal with that? This stuff just starts coming off your tongue because you start getting this real feeling of responsibility. You're now the captain of these airplanes. You're 21, 22 years old. These aircraft fly about 500-600 miles an hour. We're flying them about 70 meters off the floor. If you've ever been, up in Scotland for sure, but especially around Wales, if you've been walking on top of the hills, we're down in the valleys below you, and we're only young guys, learning your craft. So, and you've got to be focused. And so that's what's happening outside of it. Now, the actual thrill, without getting, that's all the scientific, boring stuff. Now, what's it like to fly one of these airplanes? It's fucking awesome because, in matters of seconds, you're going hundreds of miles an hour. When you go around the corner, especially when you finish training, you get onto something like the Eurofighter, the Typhoon, the aircraft I flew. That thing in seconds goes from 0 to 9G. Your head weighs 9 stone in about a second and a half. Your blood is getting drained out your head. You're fighting to strain your muscles so that you don't black out. It's you weigh 9 times the force of gravity, and you're trying to move your neck because you're in a dogfight, and the guy's doing about another 500 miles pointing at you, trying to shoot you down. So it's insane, is what it really is. And when you first get exposed to that, it's just overwhelming, and it just takes a while really to sit back, relax, process it, compartmentalize it, and that's how you kind of got through the system.
What is the training process for adapting to and then, I guess, tolerating and performing under G-force?
Mate, you're well trained. Initially, as you start to get onto aircraft, the faster they go, clearly the higher the G-force is going to be because the way in which you turn those aircraft means that it's proportional and therefore you're going to pull more G the faster you are. So what we do is we initially get exposed on the ground in a centrifuge. And you may have seen these spinning around. You see them mainly on like the astronaut programs, don't you? And guys looking like they're about 90 years old because all the fat in their face getting dragged down towards their chin. You look awful. It's the worst video. They give you a video at the end. It's the worst video you've ever been given. And they start off about 3-4G.
Have you still got that video?
I have still got that video. Yeah, unfortunately.
Are you allowed to send it to us?
Absolutely not. I ain't going anywhere.
I was hoping we could use it for a YouTube clip. That would have been fantastic.
You get into this and they start, you go through the lectures on the ground and we go, the Air Force is really good. They've got like an aeromedical facility which kind of backs up as a school in Bedfordshire. So you sit through lectures of the physiological effects of flying fighter aircraft. So not only is it the G, for example, if you accelerate in cloud, visually you can't see that you're accelerating anymore because it's in thick fog. But even if you're level, the way in which the hairs and the the water in your ear reacts will make your brain think you're climbing, because you get that kind of pushback in your seat. So pilots in the past have pushed forward on the controls and flown into the ground because the acceleration has made them think they're climbing. They've counteracted that, but actually what they're doing is descending. You can go into a cloud and turn and level out. Your brain still thinks you're turning because you've got no visual aspects. So you get taught how to deal with things like that in terms of trusting your instruments and all the rest of it. And then again, what G's going to do to you. And so they teach you maneuvers. So we kind of tense especially your lower body, because positive G, your blood's getting drained from your head essentially, and from your eyes. So you lose your vision first, and then eventually you lose consciousness. So they teach you how to keep your muscles as you're coming into a turn, how to pre-arm your body, how to basically get, if you're about to take an impact on a rugby field, you kind of brace up a bit. So do that. Short, sharp breaths to keep blood pressure high. And once you practice it on the ground, they put you in the centrifuge, they spin you around, they show you how to do it. Which is a safe way to pass out, really. It's called loss of consciousness through, G-induced loss of consciousness is what it's called, G-lock. And they teach you how to avoid it, but it's a safe way in which to experience if it's going to happen to you. And then away you go. You get in your jet, and the instructor's in the back, and you start to say, right, this is 4G, this is 6G, this is 8G. And you just practice it, really, and your body does become used to it. If you and I were to get put, I keep going back to rugby, but if we play rugby now and took a couple of knocks this weekend, we'd be sore as anything. You do a couple of weeks, you're not so bad. I can imagine Formula One drivers. If we got in a Formula One car, our neck would be in bits on the Monday, but for them, they get out there, they're cracking on with it. So eventually, your body does get used to it, and it becomes second nature. But that also can become dangerous, clearly, because you get complacent.
What was your first experience in, I guess, a fighter jet? So going beyond pedestrian planes, we'll call them, really experiencing that military level power for the first time. I assume you were assisted. I assume there was somebody in a cockpit behind you, or to talk us through the day.
Yeah, sure. By the way, I'm taking pedestrian airplanes. I've still got some mates in the Air Force who don't fly fighters, so I might have to text them after this. How's your pedestrian airplane? I'm taking that. So the first time, it's just exhilarating. You're scared. You're slightly panicked. You're breathing quickly. You've got some rubber mask on your face, like forcing oxygen into your mouth. You've got a helmet on. You've got your dark visor down. You've got your G suit on. Everyone's talking to you on the radio. The instructor's in the back saying, "Hey, you're all good," and you're trying to keep up with everyone else because, again, as I say, it's a competitive environment. But you turn onto the runway, and it's just 2 miles of tarmac in front of you, and you get cleared to take off, and you push the thrust lever forward, and it's the first time as well, which no one really explained to you. Normally, up to then, you've been flying an airplane with a propeller. Sounds weird, but you're used to seeing something in front of your face that's pulling you through the sky. Now all of a sudden there's this massive scream, and you're getting pushed down the runway with a jet engine, which every other airliner and stuff would happen, but these things accelerate fast. And so you just take off, you put your gear up, and then you just from then on you're just kind of strapped in for the ride. And although the Hawk, which was our first jet, was fast and was fun, the experience and acceleration of the Typhoon, which was my first frontline airplane, was just something else. That thing goes from about 200 to 600 miles an hour in 21 seconds. So, the power is just phenomenal. And it's actually scary because you think, no, it can't still be going. And, there goes 300 miles an hour. He's like, can't still be going. There's 4, 5, 6. And this thing is just flying. It doesn't pull back. So, it's down to you to manage that. But yeah, as you can imagine, just the sheer thrill of being thrown forward that fast is just, crazy.
I was going to ask if the novelty ever wears off, but I can tell by the animation with which you're describing it that would be a waste of time asking
no, never. And I fly airliners now. I love it. It's a different challenge, and it's a great job. It's a rewarding job, and there are times where it's particularly difficult. Everyone thinks, you fly fighters, so you fly airlines, it must be boring. Absolutely not. It's almost the completely different to how people think it will be. But yeah, the one thing I really do miss is the power and acceleration that those jets have. It was just phenomenal.
Have you ever driven a supercar or a hypercar?
No, nothing like massive. I've been very lucky. I've done like track days in high performance cars, and that kind of thing where you slam. If you've done one where they make you slam on the brake, you're going about 120, 150 miles an hour. They go, just slam the brakes on and show the performance of the car. It's almost that in reverse. You just cannot believe that an aircraft can give you that much performance.
Did you enjoy being in the car, or was it a little bit wasted on you?
Well, actually, no, I didn't. Do you know what's weird, man? I don't do roller coasters. I don't do any of that. I don't know if it's because there's no escape option. I'm not sure, but it's not really my thing. I kind of like the 3D motion in the sky. It's like the other thing I do miss about military flying is that you can wherever you want to fly. As long as it's not restricted airspace. If you're at low level around Scotland and you think, I'm just going to go over there, you can just go over there. I missed the freedom that you had. You could, as a military pilot, coordinate with most air traffic controllers to go wherever you wanted.
Wow.
Whereas it's much more restricted for the right reason in civilian flying, because it makes it much safer. But yeah, the freedom of flying those aircraft around, low level through, you go through valleys in Wales at 250 feet, as I say, 70 meters off the floor, doing about 500 miles an hour. The granite is rushing past your head on each side. You just fit your airplane down them, and there's people walking on the skyline above you. You can see them silhouetted in the sun above you. It's phenomenal.
So before we unpack your career, I think, given that a lot of people will have either A, seen a video of, or B, have experienced in some point of life a civilian experience of a fighter jet. What you've just described, I've experienced in Wales, I've experienced in Scotland. Unbelievable when it happens. And the probably most well-known documentation is a stretch, visualization of this is in Top Gun. So how realistic is it?
I'd say it's a documentary, yeah.
Oh, okay.
No,
okay.
I'm joking. Our volleyball's shit. No, do you know what? It's the process, how it represents the environment is pretty accurate. Obviously, there's Hollywood added to a lot of it. The second one, clearly is more accurate than the first because, as modern films have developed, as has their research and development, and also the support they have for it. So, Top Gun 1, I grew up, or Top Gun as it's called, I grew up, I love that film. That kind of inspired me. And that happens, you can see the sheer power, when they increase the thrust and you get the afterburners, you see all the fire come out the back of the jet and the jet starts spinning around. That's true. That happens, The kind of dogfighting, low-level dogfighting it's called, that happens. That's all true. The Americans live a bit of a... Do you know what? Probably it's more accurate to American squadron than a British squadron. Where
that doesn't shock me.
In everything in life, we just don't accept the cheese as much, do we, in our way of life? So, we didn't even have call signs, so Maverick doesn't exist in the Royal Air Force, unfortunately. It's just your last name with a Y on it. So, Losey for me, and that's it. I think we just kind of roll with it. So, I kind of hope it's because we're a bit more understated. Clearly, there's a lot of ego flying around because you do need ego and you need self-belief when you're strapped into a jet. And, most of these aircraft are what we call single seat. So there's no navigator in the back. Going through training, you would have an instructor in the back for some trips. There are some jets that do have navigators, but the airplanes we flew, they just had one seat. So, in moments of crisis, you're going fast. There's huge amounts of information to process. There's no sitting there and asking questions. You have to believe in yourself because you need to cipher through what's right and wrong and make a decision. And the cheesy thing I will say here is that, fighter jets have and will continue to change the history of the earth, of the world and civilization. We're talking right now, and there's some pretty tasty stuff, unfortunately, going on in the Middle East. That will change generations of people. So you have to make sure you know exactly what you're doing at the right moment and you get it right, because going wrong is front page global news and possibly massive political and economic, problems if it was the wrong decision. So or knock-on effects if it's the wrong decision. So so you've got to get it right. So that's the high-end stuff. It's not the top off jeans on playing volleyball with your mates. But that happens. The socializing is fantastic. But if you go on to the second one, which I think is called like Top Gun Maverick or whatever they called it, I would say that's more realistic to what they're high-end flying's trying to achieve. And even though it's called Top Gun, we have a version of that in the UK. We call it the Qualified Weapons Instructor Course. Even that, we can't bring ourselves to be cheesy enough to call it Top Gun. But it's a similar thing. The top pilots every year in the entire Air Force are put on this course, whatever airplane they're flying, and they're given all the resource. For example, let's say there's 150. Is an inaccurate number, but let's say it's been 150 and 200 pilots flying the Typhoon. 4 pilots will get on the Top Gun school, if I can call it that on here, for that calendar year. And they will be trained in everything that aircraft does and become tactical experts. They'll be experts on system knowledge, weapon employment, tactics. They'll also be instructors for the next generation, new guys joining the squadron or new missions coming in, they're the guys that will be designing them. So you hold the standard really moving forward. And that's about 7 months. And that's kind of what the Top Gun school that you see in the film is depicting, the high-end guys on each squadron getting sent to a dedicated school to become the best they can be. So that was also very accurate. And what I thought was really good about the second one is now the aerial photography and the footage that you watch, that's what it's like. That is what it's like. When you set up for a dogfight, you are what we call nose to nose. So their aircraft pointing at your aircraft. So you start on a neutral footing. You're both doing about 480, 500 miles an hour. So you have a closing speed of 1,000 miles an hour. You pass each other at about 500 feet. And you have to make an instant decision about how you're going to turn, where you're going to put your energy in order to get into hopefully a winning position, or how you're going to defend because he's coming in a lot faster as a more capable aircraft. So, and you see that's what's being represented in those dogfights in the film. So, yeah, it's accurate, just with a little less cheese. That's what I'd say.
I think it's well discussed, and I wouldn't say universally acknowledged because America exists and opinions are strong, but UK Special Forces are renowned as some of the finest fighting force in the UK, in the UK rather, in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, impartially, looking at things objectively as you can, how does the UK Air Force compare to the US Air Force, other than the cheese? Yeah,
we're good. We are good. The Brits are good at everything they do, which is why we're half the whole, and I mean that across the board of everything before I get into this specifics of the Air Force. That's why the country's half the size of California and everyone in the world knows who we are. That's why we still go to the top tables and we make big decisions and people listen to us. But we're good at what we do, and we're very good at what we do with what we have. And so the United States, their equipment is unreal. It's like next level. It's just amazing. Their training system is also very, very good, and their output's very, very good. But they have like thousands, tens of thousands, of when you talk about pilots, aircraft, all the rest of it. We're talking our whole Air Force is now less than 40,000. You could fit the whole of the Royal Air Force into most stadiums or Premiership stadiums in the UK, or Premier League stadiums, I should say. So we're not big. So with that obviously comes impact, but with what we got, we're very good. We are very good. And that's been developed and designed right back from, the days of, 1918 when it first started, the Royal Air Force, but mainly kind of made its name in World War II. We talk about the Battle of Britain and the spirit of the fighter pilots, but also we saw the Lancasters going over those raids. That's really instilled like a huge pride in the service. And most men and women who join don't normally join by accident. They kind of join, hopefully with the stories I talked about, they're inspired. They want to do this job. It's something that they've got this burning thing inside of them to be a part of the Royal Air Force. And everyone will have different stories, especially when you get to the end of fighter pilot training. You look back to the editions of, you get posted, you get sent to squadrons, and these squadrons fought in the Battle of Britain. So you have a direct linearship to these guys who saved our country in World War II. And that instills a massive passion within you, which instills a culture of wanting to be the best that you can be. And the Brits are good. We're very good at low flying. It's one of our specialities. So flying low down, low in the terrain. We've got some fantastic terrain in Wales, the north of the UK, and in Scotland to practice in. Some of the best in the world. Other air forces from around the world deploy to the UK to practice. So, we just fly around our back garden essentially, and we're getting exposed to some of the best training airspace in the world. And why is it good to fly low? Well, actually, warfare has kind of changed, but it used to be that you used to fly lower than the radar, so they couldn't see you coming. Pop up, deliver your weapons, dive back to low level and run away again. And so we became very good at that. And that's where our low-level pilots and our kind of low-level strike pilots got very, very good. And then, we spent a lot of time in the 70s, 80s, with the Cold War being a massive threat and thinking we could be invaded. So our fighter pilots got very good because they constantly thought there was a chance that they were going to war. Our country, especially our military, lived, that Cold War might have been cold in terms of action, but it was very much hot in the tactics and the mindset of the Air Force. You could go at any moment. And so the guys had that sense of we're going to fight for our country here. And we joined the squadrons that you guys were on. So that's kind of the mindset of these places. And I think a lot of it is culture, and a lot of it is from that, a lot of it came from an exceptional training program. I would say we've got the oldest military flying training school in the entire world. So with that comes experience. And even though it's got smaller and smaller, it still has maintained incredibly high standards. So the output's high. I would say we're good. We're tasty. We definitely hold our own as a war fighting unit. That is for sure. The guys I've flown with, some of them are the best fighter pilots in the world by a mile. When you go toe to toe with the Americans, but they've got a higher percentage of very good pilots.
How much do you think patriotism feeds into this? Because I know you said you're inspired. I know you said that obviously you want to carry on the legacy and the lineage of those squadrons. Yeah. But whether it's just in the way that it's expressed or not, I'd say America as a whole, they're much more deeply patriotic on a day-to-day basis than I guess the Brits ever could or have been.
Yeah.
But in terms of action, in terms of commitment, in terms of doing things when it mattered, historically, we've very much shown up. I might be wrong. You'll have a much better take on this than I do, but I feel that patriotism now will become and has become less and less of a contributing factor to people's military aspirations than it maybe has been in the past. What do you believe to be the case?
I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying. The bit that I think is still there is I think we are, as a country, prouder than some people think we are. So, we still very much enjoy the trooping of the colour. I think people are still incredibly proud of what that does, or the pomp that goes around the world. We're very proud that that's a British thing. I think we're very proud of horse guards, and seeing all the tourists go there. So the stuff you just see, the low-level stuff, it's not in the papers every day. So we're not a nation that feeds into, today we attack. If there's a massive mission, sometimes you'll see it. But, there's guys and girls out there right now doing the job. It's not in any of our media. So, it's kind of put in the background. But I think as a nation, we are still patriotic, maybe not as much as probably our grandparents were, but I think one thing people are still proud of are the armed forces. And I'm not just talking about the Air Force here, I'm talking about the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines and also the Army. That we're very proud of what they do for our country. And when you join, you get a sense of that. Now, don't get me wrong, when we go on exercise in America, if you're off any American base in uniform, people come up to you in the streets and say, thank you for your service. I own a restaurant, come and have a meal, or, they pat you on the back. Here, it's very much like, don't tell anyone, kind of thing. It's just, again, it's a British thing. You don't tell them what you do. But if you went in and said, do you do 10% discount on a military ID card, mate? You'd be like, no, fuck off. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, sorry for asking, yeah. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of people who do, but there's a lot of people who don't, and it's not the same level. But that said, is there patriotism is that one of your defining roles to join the military? Yes. Although I think that does, if I'm being truthful, and I think if most guys are truthful, at 3-4 years old, you don't know that. But at 3-4 years old, are you running around your garden playing soldiers? Probably. So actually the dream probably forms before that. And then once you're in, then of course you do. You're incredibly proud of what you do, or the big parades, the fact there's the big flyovers of Her Majesty and now His Majesty's birthday down the Mall every year. That's an incredibly proud moment for the military. And when you go away, does it bother you that they're not talking about it at home? No, because it doesn't really matter, does it? You're just out there doing your job. And I think that's one thing that kind of gets fed into our training system in the military. Is like, and it becomes a thing on a squadron. You don't get above yourself. It's like you don't have a number and a name on your back like a high-end footballer or a sports person. You're not a name. You're part of this unit. And if you start believing you're anything more than that, the military has a very, very good way of chopping you down pretty quick. And so it is still in there. You're still very proud to be what you be. But yeah, I don't think it was as big a factor as it was before. But to answer your question, patriotism plays a huge, huge part. And it becomes a bigger part the longer you're in. But I don't think it was a defining factor for people joining. I think it was more a dream of doing something awesome with their life, which is what the military can offer you.
Fascinating. I think it's important to underline from my personal point of view that I'm incredibly proud of the country, and don't want to sound like a cynic, but by asking the question,
yeah,
I think
not at all.
Proud of the heritage, proud of the history. I guess.
No, it's a very important question.
Frustrated with the systems currently, I think, is where if I was to shine a spotlight on myself and say, what would if I didn't have that litany of medical complete red flags that I listed earlier, there's probably a few missing off there as well, but any aspirations to join the military that I've had in the past would come through a slightly different lens for quote unquote Queen or King and country than they would have done in the past. And I think that's changed quite quickly. I think the history and the heritage and everything that you've highlighted about Britain is what I absolutely adore about it. And the landscapes you've talked about that are in our back garden are what make it what it is. I just think the current systems are frustrating to those people that are proud about all of the things that have come before it. It's just important to underline, so I don't sound like a cynic about my own country.
I get it. And I'm the same. I don't fly a flag in my back garden like some people do. But I also don't believe in rewriting history because people aren't too happy with it these days. It's like what's happened. So there's a fine line, isn't there? And it's a tricky one because it's a political hot potato, it's a social hot potato, it's all that kind of stuff. But do I think you should be proud of the country? Absolutely. And do I think when you join the military you should be proud to serve? Absolutely. And do I think when you leave, even with some of the stuff that's gone on that probably isn't so favourable in the public eye anymore? I think you should still be proud because at the time you believed it was the right thing to do. You were sent to do your job and you did it to the best of your ability. And some guys didn't come home. That's it. That's the thing. Of course, you've got to be proud.
Yeah, I think that really underlines to me where my current frustrations lie, which is in the powers that be, quote unquote, not necessarily losing sight, but I think 2020 onwards, it's become more and more difficult to have faith that we're moving in the right direction upon reflecting upon a long period of positive motion as a country, of which we can be very proud of, and we punch well above our weight, as you've very, very clearly highlighted, from a militaristic point of view and otherwise. We probably shouldn't do as well as at the Olympics as we do, but we always do quite well, which is nice. But anyway, I think
we're good fighters, mate. This country's based on a good heritage of fighting, and I don't just mean that in terms of combat. I mean in terms of like mental mindset. The guys out there, as you just mentioned, how well have we just done in the Olympics and Paralympics? I mean, as I say, we're half the size of California-ish, plus or minus a little bit, and we're there worried about where we're in the medal tables. Do you know what I mean? It's like we've got there's countries that we're gnarly when it comes to putting our mind to something and getting jobs done.
It's probably just the weather, to be fair. The weather and the landscape that'll beat it out of you, won't it? Anyway, I think we've spoken a lot about the preliminary process and getting to the cockpit. But what were the defining moments in your career in a plane? Are there any stories or experiences that really stick out to you as the ones that make you proud to have had the career that you've had? Yeah,
mate, huge. The backdrop to how I'm going to frame this answer, if you don't mind, and especially here on the Modern Mind, and we talk about stuff along that track, is that I failed early. And I mean that in a positive way because I've talked a lot about how competitive it was, how cutthroat it was. So failure was a really big thing. Like, you didn't want to go anywhere near it. And I have happened to fail a flight on every course I did. Now, that's not great, and I'm not proud of that. I don't sit there and talk about that often. The things I want to talk to you about was, I did this amazing trip once, and I was just awesome the whole day long. And the truth is that that's not always the case. But when I talk to people now and reflect on it, failing early was the best thing that ever happened to me, because through that came most of my learnings. And that was just not just about being better prepared. That's always normally on the bullet points of what you're going to do better next time, but it was just your mindset going, right, okay, so that can happen and the world doesn't end. You will still go to bed and get up the next morning and life moves on, but the next day you are stronger from it. And I think failure is your friend. Constant failure is not your friend. And we talk about consistency in a high performance environment, so you don't want to consistently fail, because that's also not good. But to be a consistent high performer, you have to have tasted failure. And there's some, and I say I was very lucky because I experienced it early. So I knew how to conduct myself going forward, and I knew how to approach it better. I knew how to be more resilient. I knew how to communicate better. I knew how to understand or compartmentalize failure as it was happening and drop it. Because when you're flying a fighter aircraft, you're up there for between 1.5 and 9-10 hours, depending on the mission. And if you're still getting worked up about something that went wrong in the first 30 minutes, and you've got another 8.5 hours to execute, that's not great. That's not good for you. So I learned how to compartmentalize it as well. So to then put that forward, there's moments on the front line, probably on a massive exercise. If I was to look back, it's red flag. There's this huge exercise in America, and it's based off data that's being gathered by the US Air Force and the Department of Defense about survivability rates of fighter pilots, was essentially what it was created for. And it was found out through World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Most fighter pilots that were being shot down on their first 10 combat missions. So they created this exercise. It's based in Vegas, which is amazing. And it's there's an airfield just north of Vegas, which when you think you're going there to do a high-end exercise, it just blows your mind because the weekends are also obviously awesome. But it's designed to expose you to your first 10 missions and more. I think you end up doing about 15. And it's day and night, and you get put in this high-pressure cooker of high performance. And it's just the UK military normally, the US Air Force, the US Navy, the Australians come, the Canadians come, that kind of community turn up. And it is high-end stuff. It's the top guys from their squadrons normally, and you fight in a 3-week war, day and night. There used to almost be like these fake newspapers, but you're running in this false scenario, which almost becomes pseudo-real because you start believing in, because every time you come back from a mission, depending on how it goes, they shape the different battlefield. The battlefield is in the desert in North Nevada, and they have got squadrons of high-end fighter jets, so F-16s, F-15s, which were their frontline airplanes. They are trained in adversaries' tactics, so Russian or Chinese tactics, or whoever you think you might be a bit tricky in the future, and you fight them for 3 weeks. It's high end. And so when I look back on a highlight, that has to be one of the highlights. Deploying to Nevada, just as I say, awesome base to be a part of. You were taxiing out. There was like 160 fighter jets taxiing out really at some points, or 160 pilots, as you say, so an 80 to 120 fighter jets taxiing out. They're all launching off, especially at night. You just see streaks of fire disappearing up into the sky, and it just goes into the black. And then all of a sudden you're up there with them, and the comm is insane. You can imagine all those people on the radio shooting. Not real missiles, by the way. We've got systems that would tell you where you shot, and the GPS would track where it would go. So we could then sit down in this massive Odeon-style theatre and play back the whole mission. You could see who was shot down, who would have survived, who made it, what went wrong, how could you do it differently next time. So that was a huge highlight for me, because I felt at that point, having grown up, obviously you hear this about this exercise as a kid as well, if you're into the military flying like I was, and to be there leading these missions on some of the evenings and being just a part of high-end worldwide fighter pilot operations. So that was probably one of my biggest highlights as a frontline operator. And then clearly, I would put it down as my absolute career highlight was in 2016 when I finally passed. And I talk about failure. I'll add failure to this moment when and finally is a big word here, was successful in my application and selection to join the Red Arrows, which is the UK's display team. And I talk about failure there because it took me 3 application processes. The first one being I just turned up, I got selected to go to their training camp, and I just wasn't good enough, both through my flying, through how I was as a person to be around. I was nervous, I was quiet, I was talking in questions, that kind of thing. I was probably just pissing everyone off, really. And then the second time, there was an issue meant I couldn't actually join the selection process because of stuff that's happening on a squadron. And then finally, my third year, because you have to wait 12 months between each application round, I was successful. So there so many times in that process I could have said, do you know what? Yeah, it's taken 3 years, it's taken too long, change tack, let's go. But I didn't, because it was what I dreamed of. So it's holding true to what you want to go for. And finally, through having been through the process twice and failing, I was able to learn from that, which meant that I turned up on the third time. You can imagine how competitive it is to get into the Red Arrows. I think it's less now, but it used to be about between 35 and 50 people apply every year for 2 to 3 slots. It gets whittled down to 9. 9 people go away on their selection process. You live and breathe Red Arrows training camp for a week. I don't know if it happens in sports teams, but it would almost be like rugby players going, I keep going back to rugby, I don't know, I love my rugby, but let's just say we go with that one. Rugby players who want to be selected for England, they have to go and, the year before they're allowed in the team, they have to go to Penny Hill and live with the England team. So they room share with a starting 15. they eat breakfast, they train, they lift weights, they go to all the training sessions, they come back, they recover, they have dinner, they go to a social, and then they go to bed again. And so the applicants go and live with the team, embedded with the team, and do everything the team do for a full week, including social events, as I mentioned. PR interviews, clearly it gets more serious. We give them a flying test at some point, and we also give them formal interviews on the ground. But we make them live the life, and you are made to live the life of an operator for that week, because it's hard. It's hard work. You fly 3 times a day, 5 days a week. A show's about 35, 40 minutes of flight time. You pull in 6, 7G, it's about 32 degrees outside because you're training in Greece. It's a hot, sweaty, hard environment. And every time you land, you're not getting ripped apart, but you are going in detail through everything you've done. So you're constantly being debriefed. So every flight is debriefed. And so getting through that system and then being good enough and selected to join the team was again, another massive highlight. And then clearly 3.5 years with the team, 3 display seasons of where we went all around the world is just, again, it's going to be hard to put it into words, mate, to be honest with you. It's just phenomenal. You're flying between 6 and 7 feet from some of your best mates at 350, 400 miles an hour, upside down. Sometimes you're 100 feet off the ground doing 450, 500 miles an hour. You're displaying to hundreds of thousands of people in the crowd. And it's the one environment I've been where you just fully trust each other. And I mean, trust each other with your lives. Like, you're not even looking at the guy next to you because you trust he's in the right place. You're looking at the guy past him. And, he's only 7 feet away from you doing 400 knots, bouncing around in turbulence. So when I look back, as thrilling as the flying was, like that highlight of being part of a team that you trusted, you were fully invested in, and nothing in the world got in the way of being a member of that team. That has to be the ultimate highlight of my flying time with the Air Force.
I've seen them before, and it is remarkable. So it's exciting to get an inside view on it. Did you get shot in Red Flag?
Have you done some research?
There's a specific angle I'm going down here. So
no, I didn't get shot, but we'll talk about. There's another good lesson here. So I didn't get shot, but I on my first ever shot, and thank God it was in a training environment. But there was a breakdown, and this huge breakdown in communication. So another massive lesson learned. When you find those airplanes, at that time we were probably doing about 9 miles a minute. Maybe even supersonic, which is over 10 miles a minute. So you're covering a lot of ground. You're shifting. We talk about 20 miles an hour around schools here. We're nearly doing that a minute when we're up there. We're going fast. So you're covering a lot of ground. There's a guy probably coming at you at similar speed. So you've got a closing speed of about, let's just say about 16 to 18 miles a minute. And he's only starting at about 100 miles away from you. So 100 miles away sounds like a long... If I asked you to run 100 miles, you're like, that's a long way. Although I know that your training programs will offer that. So there you go. Good plug.
Good plug. Cheers.
But you're covering ground fast. You ain't got a lot of time to make a decision. And there's a lot of stuff coming in. So your radar is basically looking for enemy fighters and telling you where they are. But their airplanes nowadays are so advanced that if you put some radar energy onto them, they can distort that energy. So you won't. If I was to, essentially, it's like throwing a ball at a brick wall, and you would expect it to bounce back, and you can catch it. But this is like throwing a ball and hitting the corner of a wall. You don't know where it's going to go. It could bounce anyway, right? So that's kind of what's happening. So the information you're coming back is skewed from what you're expecting it to be. And clearly, you again talk about your not hyper. That's not the word, but you're about to shoot something, or you're about to get shot. So you're engaged, you're what's the word, excited is the word, I guess, but you're focused. And on this particular day, what we're getting to is that I found what I thought was an enemy fighter. I asked a higher authority, which we get told to speak to before I can shoot. I said, hey, look, this is a bad guy, can I shoot him, essentially? And they said yes, but there was a breakdown in comms, and what I was telling him when they looked at was a different their picture didn't look the same. And so when they came back to me and said, yeah, go for it, I shot. And it turns out that the way in which I had told this person what I was looking at and the way in which the person spoke back to me in our heightened moment of we're about to get in a fight here, the breakdown in comm meant that we weren't looking at the same thing and we weren't talking in the correct language, which meant that the missile I would have shot would have hit a friendly aircraft and killed a friendly crew. So that is in battle the worst thing you can ever do, blue on blue. Not only clearly for the whole environment, but for yourself. Living with that would have just been awful. So yeah, that was the biggest lesson. Now it goes a bit further in the military because, as I say, they got a good way of cutting you down. So you can't just say, "Hey, I'm really sorry about that." Training environment doesn't work like that. So I had to write a real letter to his wife saying that I would have killed your husband today, and I then had to buy a lot of beer for their squadron. So it gets this. I'm talking about this. This exercise was at Red Flag, as I mentioned. It's high end stuff. It's like there's no messing about. You write a handwritten letter to a guy saying, "Yeah, sorry, today I falsely killed your husband in a false environment, but that would have been for real." So you learn those lessons harshly, but you take them with you. I promise you that.
That was part one of my question, whether I was gonna deep dive on that. But it was what I'm interested in as well is I assume you spoke with the person that you falsely killed.
Yeah,
I guess in this environment.
Yeah.
How did they feel and process the fact that in this false but also very real environment they would be dead?
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of just
they
felt sorry for me. That's the weird thing. They felt sorry for me. They understood the stress we were working at, and the lesson that there was far more lessons than I shot the wrong guy. It's like where that aircraft was in the mission it was doing. Maybe we shouldn't have been looking to shoot other airplanes down in that scenario because he was almost a stealth airplane. So he shouldn't really. He was in the right place. Our plan was to have him in that place. Mm-hmm. So actually, before we stepped out, there was always a chance that we were going to see him. And if you weren't 100% sure who he was, you're going to call it in. But we shouldn't have seen him, for example. He was what we call jamming. So he was one of our jammers trying to jam their jets. But the way in which their jets were coming to him and I could see him, it looked like, the scenario rolls on. The bottom line is I pulled the trigger. So it rests with me.
When you were describing Red Flag earlier, I just found myself thinking, how would I have felt if in a hyper-realistic but quote-unquote safe environment, would I have felt in that Odeon cinema style debrief being told that had this been based on the research, my first, third, fifth mission, you would not have survived? Did you have conversations with people in the mess hall afterwards? Did you get that out of him? Did people process that differently? Because
no,
you've not cheated death, but the research has almost allowed you to experience the things that previously would have been death, which is in some ways quite terrifying, but very much reinforces the value of Red Flag, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the answer is no, because it was tens of miles away from each other. Yeah. On a shot that could have been. It's a little bit like, a bit odd, a bit weird. Guys actually end up feeling sorry for you in a way. Some guys, clearly the bosses are angry at you because you've just embarrassed yourself. But you've also embarrassed the Air Force a little bit because we're on a high-end exercise here with the US Air Force and the Brits have just shot one down. That ain't cool. But no, in terms of how did he feel, no, we didn't have those conversations. I went and knocked on their door because each it's like changing rooms, if you like, but each squadron has their own planning room in this building. So I went and knocked on the door with a couple of crates of beer and they came in, the guy gave me a hug, cracked a beer with him, said, "Hey, look, man, I'm really sorry." He said, "Hey, look, don't worry about it." And we talked about the high things of it. Now, why would that have been the case? The case is because it was made up. I think we're quite real people with that. And you said, quite rightly, quote unquote, a safe environment. It is still a very dangerous environment. And most guys flying high performance airplanes probably have some stories where they nearly actually didn't come home, even in training, So I think when, we're more upset with when guys get too close to us or they don't see us and they kind of what we call getting dusted off, guys flying the wrong way over the top of you at 500 miles an hour, they haven't seen you. Yeah, that stuff's going to kill you for real. So guys tend to get upset with that. And that is a part of Red Flag because you've got all those airplanes I mentioned in a finite amount of airspace. So the coordination of airspace and who's got the right level and stuff can get more upsetting. But no, he never really got upset with me for what he would have. I don't know. Maybe weeks later he got home and was out on a long run and thought, "Oh, that's weird. I wouldn't have been doing this today." But at the time, no, it wasn't. It wasn't something we discussed.
Interesting. Yeah, I just found myself visualizing myself in that theatre, thinking, how would that have unfolded?
I tell you what, mate. Let's go into this. So if you dogfight and you lose a dogfight, you've been shot down. You're dead.
Yeah,
and we do that every day. So we're probably softened to the fact that we got shot down today. It was just embarrassing that it was a blue on blue. But if it was you and me, if you and me were on a squadron right now, there'll be guys as we speak right now in the UK going, right, there's a jet over there. Come on, we've got a mission to do on the way back. Do you fancy a dogfight? And it's basically like you and me having an arm wrestle.
Yeah,
but the end result would have been
sparring,
I would have killed
effectively,
you.
isn't it?
Yeah, you're just sparring.
Yeah.
That's it. You're just sparring. That's it. Yeah, that's the best way to do it.
I think it's just, obviously, it just reinforces the value of the research that led to the creation of Red Flag, because that effectively saved, I mean, there'll be a number. I'm sure there will be a number. It has saved this many pilots' lives through going through this process rather than doing it, because dogfights are a part of training.
Yep, exactly.
And that's upskilling you to the point where you are deemed, I guess, battle ready. Mm-hmm. However, if you can live through those first 10 combat encounters, once you are already battle ready, you are there much less likely to die. It just goes to show how sophisticated and actually how valuable these different countries coming together for the sole aim of keeping these pilots alive.
Huge, mate. And it's like you say there, like it's called combat ready. You got to be combat ready. So you have to already be a combat ready pilot. And most guys have been on combat ready operations when they get to Red Flag, but they're still learning. It's still high end. And actually, loads of people would have learned, unfortunately, again, for my error, because, if you straw polled it, I probably wasn't the only person there who would have pulled the trigger, because of the way in which when we broke it down, there was guys going, fucking hell, a lot of guys went, shit, I probably would have pulled the trigger. Not everyone, clearly, but there have been a lot of guys who may have been, if they were presented that exact scenario at the time I was presented it. Yeah, and the worst thing is, in this Odeon cinema, mate, it's fucking awful, right? See, there's basically this Odeon cinema with 160 people, 200 people sat in it, and you play back this GPS track, as I mentioned, and you say stop when you fired a missile. And at this point, obviously, we've landed, we come to the debrief. I don't know it's been a bad guy. No one knows it's a good guy. So at the time I land, it's like, oh, we've done a good job here.
Right. Okay.
So you're in this debrief room, and you get to the point where you get to a timestamp, a GPS timestamp of when you would have shot, right? And you shout stop, which stops the whole debrief, and you stand up and you say your name and you say, this is me shooting this person at this GPS coordinate, and they track it and they go, yeah, that's a kill. Right? So I shout stop like I'm a fucking hero. Stand up. I'm like, yeah, shooting this one. In fact, no, I sat down, so he's shooting this place. And they kind of draw the map and they go, nah, there's no one there. And I was like, well, okay, that's weird. So he's like, have you got any more information on your shot? And obviously we do, because it's all printed out from, I was like, yeah, it's this, it's at this height, it's this speed, it's this, everything I knew about. And so they draw it all up and they go, no, there's no bad guys there. And then it sinks, and then everyone realized like there's a stealth jet there. So no one can see it on the radar. And so the guy asked the room, was there anyone on the friendly forces who believes they're in the position at that time? And the guy stands up. He's like, yeah, that was us. And so now I'm stood up. So the guy says to me, stand up. So I'm now stood up in a room with 200 people. And mate, it's like the Minions. Everyone's like, whoa. And everyone just like moves their head round at me. Be like, fuck. Yeah, that awful moment when you stand up in front of 200 people who are all fighting and say, yeah, just killed the good guy. It's not great. And I think even that would have been enough for people in that room to go, do you know what? Even if I know it's a bad guy, I ain't shooting tomorrow at all. In case it's not, because I don't want to be that guy stood up saying no. And so there would have been so many lessons learnt across the board, but no more than I learnt that day for sure.
That'll hammer it home, I'd say.
Mate, awful.
I'd say
awful.
This is a bold question. I don't mean it to be almost impossible to answer in some ways, but is there any part of you that has ever wished or wanted to apply your experience in a time that warranted more combat? Or are you...
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, the survival rate wasn't high, and I was... Even though our aircraft, we called it multi-role, so it's air-to-air and air-to-surface, it was able to do combat missions in just the aerial environment, as we call it, like a fighter jet, with a traditional fighter jet. But it also was able to deliver air-to-surface weapons. So, laser-guided and precision weaponry. So, clearly, Battle of Britain. I mean, if you haven't, and if your listeners haven't, there's an amazing book called First Light by Geoffrey Wellham. And he was a 19-year-old Battle of Britain fighter pilot. And so if you read that, you can't help but be inspired. So yeah, would I love to have been part of that? Yeah, survival rate was low, but of course I would have been. That would have been incredible. And another one I always have been inspired by is Vietnam, a pretty gnarly war for sure. And I'm not a warmonger, by the way. I don't sit there going, I really want to go. But if you were to ask me as a highly skilled operator in what I was trained in, what environments would I like to have done my role in? I would like to have been there. There was a particular squadron called the Wild Weasels. Again, Google them, have a look at what they did. There was basically missile systems would be able to work out when the jets were coming in, because if you push out radar energy into the environment, that can be received, so they know you're coming. So these guys used to basically go into Vietnam specifically to be shot at, so then they could know where the missiles were coming from and destroy the missile sites. So these guys were going in every day saying, hey, we're over here. And these telegraph poles were getting fired at them. Like the telegraph poles you see on the street are the size of these missiles. They're doing 20 miles a minute at you, and if they explode, you're done. No, you're gone. And these guys were getting airborne every day just to get shot at, to then find out where the weapon systems were to destroy them, and then let the guys go in and do whatever they need to do the next day. So some of their books are just amazing. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff I would absolutely love to have been a part of, those kind of squadrons. The camaraderie, the sense of purpose, what you guys were out there doing. It was just gnarly stuff. I'd love to be a part of something like that.
Does simplicity play a part in it? Because transitioning to civilian life becomes more on your own terms, less regimented. The purpose becomes less clear. Mm-hmm. Bills become variable. Mm-hmm. Where you live becomes variable. Where you eat, what time you eat becomes variable. All of these things that are administered in many ways throughout a military career. How did you transition into civilian life, and did the change from simple, comrade-driven, purpose-driven existence seem like something that you'd left behind, or can you manifest that into your current existence?
No, big time. So purpose is huge. When you've dreamed about it all your life and then you've done it and then you're not it anymore, it's like, whoa, 1 minute. I didn't really think about that. I didn't dream of being a fighter pilot that then became onto something else. But then again, I was always set that I wasn't going to stay in there forever. My father's an airline pilot, my brother's an airline pilot, my sister's cabin crew. So, my family fly. But it wasn't like, I'm just going to do that after. It wasn't really I'm going to go on and be the best airline pilot you can, because actually you can't really be the best airline pilot you can be, because the system doesn't really allow that. You turn up, you do your job, you go home, and after so many years of being a certain seniority number, you get given the opportunity to go further. The way in which civilian aviation is set up, clearly they want the best talent. It doesn't, and I'm not saying, by the way, I'm the best, most talented pilot. I don't mean that at all, but it doesn't mean you can't get any further from being a better pilot than anyone else in the system. It's just done on time served. And as long as you keep ticking the boxes, no one can tick the box better than someone else. So that's changed. So whereas in the military, high performance were identified, given a lot of time, given a lot of the budget to go on and be the best they can be, that doesn't happen out here. So that's weird, because if you want to be the best you can be, it doesn't mean much to anyone else. So that's something that took a lot of adjusting. You're just a number in the system now, which is fine.
It'll very quickly sap any ambition or drive or
just keep turning
purpose
up.
From you.
Just keep turning up. Be good at what you do. You get a couple of check rides a year. You've still got to be a high standard to get into any of these organisations. You can't just roll into British Airways. They're the flag carrier of the UK. You've got to be a high caliber pilot to even get in these organisations. Then other airlines do exist, and it's the same for all of them. But if you turn up there day one and you're fucking awesome, you ain't accelerating the 15-year system to become a captain. You just keep turning up, and it's not like you join maybe a investment firm and you've got an eye for it and you're awesome. They're probably going to put you in. They're probably going to pay you a lot quickly and put you in a position of power that you can make the calls. But it's not the same here. So you have to adjust that. You have to drop ego. You have to drop what you were before. You're not that anymore. So that definitely changes purpose, because what's the point of being the best you could be every day when you're not able to execute the best you can be every day? But that comes down to personal pride and preparation. So I've kept that. And then structure is huge. Structure is massive. Even if it wasn't as regulated as some of the things you said, it wasn't far off. I knew in the Reds, I knew where I was going to be in any working week to within 5 minutes. And it was given to me in an A5 pamphlet on a Tuesday morning. And
was it laminated, at least?
Hey?
Was it laminated?
It wasn't. No, I should have been laminate. I was a nightmare. Mine got covered in coffee all the time. But it would get put in your little mail slot at work, and you had it in your pocket, and it was within 5 minutes of every working day for a whole week where you were going to be, what time. When you went to fly, it even had in there the amount of fuel that was going to be in your airplane. It told you what you were going to wear at your social function that night. It was everything. It ruled your life. What time your bags had to be delivered to get put on the truck to get to the show. And so you went from that to, I can wake up every time I want. And I don't like that. I'm an early morning person, but that took a while I could wake up at 8:30, 9 in the morning and no one would give a shit. That's weird, especially if they're not calling you. You get a lot of time off as a civilian pilot. And if you wanted to, you could just do nothing. But I'm not that. And it's a fine balance trying to work it out, because if you can do anything you want to do, which includes doing nothing, applying structure is hard.
What were the things that you found most useful as tools to be able to do that? Because civilian, military, or otherwise, there's a lot of people listening, there's a lot of people in the modern world that struggle with purpose, fulfillment, structure, routine, being the best version of themselves that they can be every day. So applying your military experience to a civilian background, what are the things that you believe are not necessarily universally, but generally applicable for people to help find their purpose?
Yeah, and it's not about living a hard life. People see the military as living a hard life. It's not that. It's, early mornings and cold showers aren't there to live a hard life. They're there if you genuinely believe that's going to make you better. Get up early and do it, because it will make you feel better. It's what I've come to believe is achievement. It's like, what do I want to achieve this week? And it's being real with that and holding yourself accountable to it. I like my early morning runs. I've got the next 3 days off. I got up this morning, the weather was shit. Still went for a run. And it's that kind of mindset. And it's because if I didn't, then all of a sudden I'm having a coffee at 8. I've already failed once that day. And failure, then you think, well, apathy kind of comes in. You go, well, I haven't done that yet. I'll tell you what, I'll put the washing on. So you put the washing on, and then this isn't how my day went, by the way, but it's just an example of how it kind of spirals. Then you think, I'll go for a run now, but the washing machine finishes an hour and a half, I'll go then. Classic stuff in your day gets in the way. Yeah. So the reason it's important for me, and the reason what I bring from the military side, is that discipline side, because if you let one thing slip, the whole thing slips. And there's that very famous speech about always make your bed. I always make my bed. That I've come from the military, but that's like the first win of the day, and as soon as you got that, there's nothing better than achieving what you said you're going to achieve. So the reason I think it's important to have structure, which I brought from the military, is that it just makes you feel better about yourself when you do what you say you're going to do. And that's what I kind of try and do in my week.
Momentum swings both ways.
And consistency, right? I mean, that's a whole different thing. We'll go into it, but if you consistently do that, then high performers aren't there all the time, are they? You don't go off and just do one thing that's awesome and high performer. You're there consistently. And when you look at the guys, I've had something in military that I kind of bring out now, but unfortunately, social media plays a huge part in this. So you've got to be careful what you're looking at. One of the things I talk about elsewhere about success and high performance environment is very early on. And each time I joined a new squadron and I was in a new unit, I picked the person I thought was the person I would like to be. One of the highest performers, the most experienced guy in the squadron. Might just be the way he talked to people, might be the way he flew his airplane, might be the way she, commanded the squadron. I was like, right, what do they do? And I just took bits of them and kind of just copycatted them. Not like in a sycophantic way, just in the way that what they do, how can that approach my life? And I mentioned social media because it's too easy to wake up and go, these people are awesome. I want a six-pack, or I want to climb Everest. I want to do anything you want to do. It's there at the most extreme level of success in social media, which can put you off it. But if you are able to take a few little bits out of maybe just your friends or the people around you that you admire the most and bring that into your life, I think that's another fantastic way in which you can find yourself performing to a consistent level. And I think if you were being honest, what you like about them is because they're consistently like that. And so I think that's quite an important thing to bring into day-to-day life.
Agreed. There was a quote I used in a YouTube video the other day that I've just scrambled to find whilst you essentially discussed the importance and power of a win in the morning, which is the future you is depending on the current you to keep the promises you made to yourself yesterday. Which
go, man.
I think just summarizes exactly.
I wish I'd said that.
I wish I didn't have to learn. I wish I didn't have to look it up rather than just have it there on the tip of my tongue. But yeah, no, I agree entirely. I think where people, what people discount is how much momentum can be built by doing something now that will bleed into tomorrow, and also don't give enough credit to how much not doing something now will bleed into tomorrow. And 100%. I think that's where having faith that the vision of success that you might perceive on social media is not something that can be achieved tomorrow, but by doing something now that moves towards that, it's something that can be achieved in the future, is a big mindset shift that people need to have, because things aren't available as quickly as people might believe them to be. But if you want them to become available, then there's work to be done, and that is something that's often within your control. And that is an exciting opportunity to have. And I think structure, discipline, and getting a win first thing in the morning, whatever that might look like to you, is a great way to do it. So I think final question before we depart, and I go and watch Top Gun Maverick again.
I might after this, to be fair.
That's reassuring to know, actually. Reassuring to know that Hollywood's got one right. Is what was it about the Red Arrows that made you so proud? Was it the trust? Was it the heritage? Was it the performative element? Was it the peak of a career within your craft? Because I can tell by the way you described it earlier, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the thing you're most proud of.
Oh, hugely. It's more, it encompasses everything you've said. Everything you've said, I would say yes to, but it's, as a unit, everyone turned up every day and they were unrelenting in their pursuit of excellence in whatever they did. You know, you see 9 airplanes in the sky. Those 9 airplanes are flown by 9 pilots, but those 9 pilots are put in the sky through a whole system behind them. There's 150 engineers working day and night to get those airplanes in the sky, but there's a training system behind that that's got those people to there. It's the planning, it's the forethought, it's the training. As you say, it's the trust, it's the communications, all of those things combined. But every single person, it's the only place I've worked where it's a small unit, 150 people. 150 people turn up every day, and every single person wants to be the best in the world. And it gets in your blood. You know, this, as I say, it's an unrelenting pursuit of excellence. And it was even on the badge. The badge was a clap, which is Latin and brilliance, excellence. It means a bunch of stuff, but essentially we saw it as excellence. And we had a saying that, you know, you could always pursue it, never achieve it. But that was because you can get close, but you will never achieve pure excellence. There's always something that's going to go wrong. But yeah, most proudest of the whole thing was the fact that everyone there wanted to be the best in the world. And that's the most inspiring and most rewarding environment I've ever been fortunate enough to be a part of.
And I'm going to go out on a limb and say some people might believe that this is wrong. Some people might have hedge funds where they'd argue against me, but I don't think that can be replicated in a civilian environment.
You can't buy it. And that's why, you know, we used to go to schools and talk to kids, and we used to go to some fairly rough parts of the country and try and inspire people to whatever it is they want to be. By the way, the Red Arrows isn't about encouraging people to join the military. It's about people deciding what they want to do in life and just making sure they're the best they could ever be in that. You know, you want to be a dentist, be the best dentist you could ever be. You want to run fish and chip shops, great, make it the best fish and chip shop in the world. That's what it's about, you know. And that's why you speak to these people, you inspire people, but we also, you know, I was very lucky to meet Her Majesty the Queen in a private event at Windsor Castle. You know, we can speak to kings and queens as well, and everyone in between. And people want to speak to you because you can't buy what the Royal Air Force and the Red Arrows give you, and it inspires so many people on different levels. And yeah, that was one of the most amazing things about that whole unit is it transcends barriers, because people can't get anywhere near it, no matter how much money you have in the world. It doesn't work like that.
Well, Dan, fantastic. Been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. Where is the best place for people to find more about what you've got going on and reach out if they ever want to try and bring you in for a talk or anything of that nature? Oh,
mate, super kind. I'm on Instagram. It's Dan Lowe's, pretty simple, but I'm also on LinkedIn. Just reach out from there, and we'll go from there. If you put in Dan Lowe speaker into Google, there'll be a bunch of different platforms of which you reach out to people. But yeah, just find me a message on LinkedIn, even if it's to discuss stuff you wanted to discuss about, you know, anything that's come up today. I love chat to people about this. So yeah, just reach out, say hello, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Brilliant. Thank you again, sir, and we'll speak very soon.
Mate, thank you for having me.